Welcome to this Ubuntu Project video facilitated by Zentertainment Enterprises. Be sure to like and subscribe if you learned something new. Now, onto the video.
Good morning.
Good morning. We're back for another Talk Therapy Tuesday series with me and
Yes.
Danielle. We're so
Good
happy to
morning,
be
everyone.
here and
Yes.
connect again in this space, and happy to be with all of you guys that are tuning in. So,
Yeah.
welcome back.
Welcome back. We hope that you are feeling fulfilled from all of the sessions that all of the collaborators have been offering. We are honored to be in this space for Mental Health Month awareness, and we hope that you really take a lot of nuggets from this session today. This is a special one for both of us, and so we'll be collaborating from both of our expertise and how we think about workplace burnout.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I think that we are going to be kind of putting our own flair on like what burnout is for both of us, in our fields, and also what we've experienced in our lives, and then adding to the cultural aspect that is really, really important to highlight. So, why don't I'm gonna go ahead and start a little bit about
Okay.
burnout and what I think is important to talk about. So, as a mental health counselor, I myself and one of my colleagues at my practice, Maddie Desatel, put together a continuing education event for other LPCs and social workers
Okay.
uh, to one, get continuing education, but also to highlight and talk about the real burnout that ends up happening with working with clients, and then how to identify burnout in clients when we're working in the mental health field. And so this is something that we're super passionate about, because I think that in the mental health field, and you know this, Danielle, like it's a lot. There's a lot of compassion fatigue.
Yeah.
It's early. And it takes a toll on us. So it's important to be able to, in our series, the one that Maddie and I put together, being able to identify between the difference between stress and burnout,
Mm.
because they are very, very different things. And one of the highlighters that I think about burnout, and the phrase is a death by a thousand tiny cuts, and it feels like you're in the middle of like a desert with nothing left. And so there's just like that feeling of isolation and feeling of depression and all of those things that kind of set in, that is really, really important that we don't get there. So we can kind of talk about what that looks like in this space, but also for Danielle, what what
Yeah.
what do you want to highlight, and what are you super passionate about with workplace burnout?
Yeah. So for me personally, I work full-time in education, and I also obviously am an entrepreneur, and I have a full-time wellness business. Also, I'm a mom. So, when I first
So like
started,
5 million jobs.
yeah. So when I first started navigating what it meant to work in education, I easily became burnt out, right? Because I also work in the counseling space of education. And I felt burned out from all that I was having to give. Right. So I think for me, I had to start to realign what that looked like for me. I also was in a space a few years ago where I gave professional development for a lot of leaders. And within those spaces, I had to also navigate and think about how I was thinking about how I worked. And were things being requested of me, or was I just being willing to do these things, right? Because I thought it would make the workplace a better environment, right? So that was probably about 5 or 7 years ago. And then I started to create a class around workplace burnout. So now I have a small community of about 7 people who we meet weekly and we discuss workplace burnout. And I give them tips and tools on how to navigate difficult work environments, because entrepreneurship is not for everyone, right? And I totally respect that, because it's for me, but it's also for me, not full time either. So I think that there are a lot of things that go into navigating it. So in my class, I try to teach, like, what are your work priorities, right? What is the organizational culture alike? What are your professional goals? And like, what are your personal values, and how does that align, right? And when those become misaligned, and then we start to feel burnout, right? In what ways did we ever double check on ourselves, right? When did we practice mindfulness, right? And when did we set healthy boundaries? Um, for me, I'm really passionate about workplace burnout and alignment, and not having to be so invested in the hustle culture. from my own personal experiences, right, early on in my career, and then because of the clients that I work with and how much work they feel is taking from them, right? So ideally, I want to teach people how to align to, you can work in an environment and show up as your authentic self, right? And still not be burnt out. I do think both of those things are possible.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I guess it just makes me think about, and I love that idea of alignment in all of these different areas, kind of like a pie piece, like, or a pie, but like all these pieces that kind of fit together. What would you say, I guess in a few words, or how would you
Mhm.
describe, like, what does alignment show up as, maybe in
Yeah.
yourself or a client of yours, or.
That's a great question. I think when my priorities, right, and alignment is about your priorities, right? And everyone's priorities is going to look different. I think when my priorities are aligned to the organizational priorities, then we have alignment, right? And when I say aligned, there's no organization that exists, that will ever exist, that will get it right, right? And you have to pick which hill you're willing to die on, right? And sometimes I think if we say less, things would be better, right? I think oftentimes we offer ourselves up or something's going on in the organization, right? That now we've offered to help in and support when no one asked us, right? Then we start to feel, well, they didn't acknowledge that I took on this extra activity. Well, no one asked you to take on that extra activity either, right? So it's a lot of people pleasing. It's a lot of not really good boundaries. And it's a lot of bonding, thinking that trauma bonding, to be exact, a lot of that
Yeah.
to think that we're going to get the optimization from an organization instead of getting that optimization from within.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, and it makes me it so I work for an EAP as well,
Okay.
as my private practice, but through the EAP there's a pretty large corporate company that I work with a bunch of clients from this specific company, and so often they come into session just feeling, I've never thought of the word misaligned,
Mhm.
misaligned with the values of the company, and just kind of feeling like they're pushing paper, or there's
Yeah.
no real goal, there's no real uh guidance of what they're supposed to be working towards, especially if it's like a research space. And so a lot of them are just feeling so unfulfilled,
Yeah.
and it's hard because it feels desolate. Like, what are they supposed to do? Where are they supposed to go? I mean, they're
Yeah.
making pretty good money. They maybe I have quite a few immigrants that have come to this country and that are working for this company, and they don't, like, they are kind of stuck in this space because of a work visa or something like that. Like,
Mhm.
and so we're trying to explore, how do we navigate this burnout that they're experiencing when they don't have any choices. So I'm putting you on the spot here with asking
Yeah,
this, but
I love this
like,
question, and I'm going to say this. I think for those individuals, and I used to be those individuals, your happiness, your fulfillment should not be surrounded by a particular career or job. You should not find fulfillment in what you do from your 9 to 5. The fulfillment is before the 9 to 5 and after. Whether you are a guardian, whether you are a mother or a father, those things don't matter. I think your fulfillment should first start with yourself, right? And for me, I love what I do, but it does not fulfill my cup. And I'm okay with that. I think people have to start being okay with things. A career or job is not supposed to make you the happiest person in the world, right? And you want to go here every single day, right? There's actually
yeah.
no job that does that.
Hmm.
Even the job of being a mother or a father or a sister, or you take care of your dog, there's no job that is going to fulfill your cup. I think there are little things that fit and complete a puzzle. And that is a part of the organization. They're just fitting into a puzzle, right? They allow you to live a certain type of lifestyle, right? That allows you to live. So I think that people get caught up when I say that if your alignment is not matched to the organizations, right? I think when you interview for a job, right? What are the values of this organization, right? And they'll be able to spit out some really big words, right? Really
Yeah.
fancy, right? My pushback is always, so tell me what that looks like then, right? Tell me what that looks like. When's the last time you practiced that? When's the last time you felt that? Start to be able to discern when people are authentic or they're just bullshitting you, right?
Yeah.
And also, we don't have to hop at every opportunity. You know, and this is coming from my spiritual side, but I think that God places us right where we need to be. And after oftentimes we're fighting to get into spots and move up within orgs, that's not what we're meant to be doing anyways.
Right.
Right. So
Right.
I would push anyone on this call, if you are having burnout, if you're feeling like this place does not value me, right? They do not see me, right? Sit down and create a list of the pros and the cons, right? If then be willing to do something about it. And if you are not willing to do something about it, then my push to you would be stop complaining about it and start to show up for yourself in other ways where you feel more fulfilled outside of your 9 to 5.
Right. And I think that's spot on, because that's kind of some of the, especially some of different dynamics and different individuals, you know, if maybe they can't, if they want to stay in this country, and then I'm specifically talking about my immigrants and transplants, of like, if they want to stay, then it looks like them just kind of continuing to truck along, and do their 9 to 5, do that job, but that focusing on that outside piece, I think that is crucial
It's
for.
really a hobby. What is your hobby? What else makes
Yes.
you happy? Right. And I always think it's a red flag when a person says, if I'm interviewing a person or if I'm thinking about someone joining my team, and they say like, my whole life is my work. I am my work.
Sustainable.
I identify with being this. I'm scared. That is not sustainable. I want people to have an identity outside of being a healthcare professional, outside of being a licensed professional counselor, outside of working in education, outside of being an engineer. Who else are you? Right?
Yeah.
And I think when we think about organizations, right, do they prioritize job satisfaction, right? And are they fulfilling and retaining their employees? And I think that's something that we have to start thinking about before we take on roles, right?
Yeah.
And I also will speak to, I know that people have to feed their families and they have to do what's best for their families too, right? So how do we combat I have to stay in this job and to do what's best for my family right now? And then I'm going to say this, that the burnout that we've experienced or are experiencing right now, those things are temporary. The feelings that we have in life about things that are terrible are temporary, and we have the power to change them. And even if they don't happen as quickly as we would like for them to, they are only so temporary, right? When I think about my burnout from a job I had 6 years ago, I can't recall some of my time there because it was temporary, right? And there are spaces where within every career where you can thrive and be the right person and be authentic. It's just finding that right organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And that leads me to my next question of, what do you think are some of the strategies that organizations can use
That's great.
to like ensure that alignment with their employees and with their contractors, or, you know, however their setup is, but what can they do if say you're a leader's coming and talking to you?
Create a supportive, inclusive environment, right? Where no matter who's coming to speak with you, whether it's the janitor who cleans up or your CEO, you make time for them, right? You make time for them. You are an advocate for change, right? And you believe that there's not one way to do anything in any company, right? And I also think that you hire individuals like me and you to come in and show them the ways in which they can retain staff, right? And look at some of the practices they have in play right now. And are they inclusive to the entire working community? And are they not? And what can it look like to change those practices, right? Because I think a lot of businesses have been around for years. They're like, this is what works, right? But are you retaining your staff? And once your staff leave here, are they happy, right? And happiness is really hard to measure. But if you have integrity, right? You very push professional development. You advocate for change for the people who serve you, and you have strategic priorities, then I think that individuals will be more happy in the workplace.
Absolutely. I think that all of those things are super doable. And I think anybody that's tuning in today, whether they're a leader or whether they're a part of an organization or looking to get into one, these are some helpful questions just to be mindful of and to think about as you're joining or as you're in. And because we can always like shift, like we can
Yeah.
always change,
Yeah.
which is, I think, the beauty of choice, right? It's
Yeah.
we can make different choices and set them up differently. But that
Yeah.
leads me into the next question I had, and wondering, how do I feel like sometimes people have unrealistic goals,
Yeah, for
when
sure.
it comes to what a workplace will look like. And I think that kind of piggybacks on what you were talking about earlier. But how can we avoid setting those unrealistic goals so that way we're not setting yourself up for failure?
Yeah, I think having realistic self-appraisal about ourselves, right?
Okay.
What does that look like? I would
Yeah.
say specifically for looking at an organization, what I want, right, within this organization. First, let's start off, has it ever even been done before? Right? Also, have I ever done it before? Right? Sometimes we are shooting for the stars and we have not just been a learner. So I think
Yeah.
at times we think we're prepared for something, and not that we're not, but I also think that there is some discernment in being willing to just sit back and learn a little bit more.
Yeah.
Right? Rather than jumping to conclusions, right? Taking things personal, having realistic self-appraisal about you. Are you able to fulfill the expectations that are set for you right now? Right? And are you fulfilling them very well? Right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the times expectations will ebb and flow. And do those expectations align to your personal and professional goals? I think everybody needs to have a 5-year plan. What's your 5-year plan? Right? I ask that if I've hired people in the past, counselors in the past, what's your 5-year plan? Talk to me about that. Right?
Yeah.
How can I, as a leader, prepare you for that 5-year plan? If you are working
Mhm.
for someone right now and they've never asked you about your 5-year plan, yeah, that's something
Yeah.
that you,
Tell 'em.
yeah, I think it's important because we're
Yeah.
cultivating individuals to eventually take over what we're doing, right? Or
Yeah.
empower them. So I think that people need to have realistic self-appraisal. And it starts with, have I ever done it? And has it ever been done within the organization before? And just because it
Mhm.
hasn't been done, I'm not saying that you won't be the person to do it, right?
Yeah.
But I think slow and steady wins the race, not
Yeah.
change within 5 days, change within a year. It takes 3 to 5 years for organizations to truly change and see data impact.
Yeah. And it makes me think as a leader and as an owner of a practice, one of the things that I've learned over the years is that I have to be forefront, like forthcoming with the expectations of my staff.
Right.
And if I'm not, then it leaves them questioning,
Yep.
and it leads them being like, well, what am I doing a good job? Like, what are my expectations? Like all of these things. And one of the best questions that I've gotten early on is whenever a staff member came in and said, what with like, because we were giving a raise or something like that, and then their response was, well, what's the expectation of me moving forward? And
Mhm.
it, like, I was like, why didn't I think of that? Like that,
Yeah,
and you learn, right? Like we're all learning, we're all growing. And so even having this conversation is such a good reminder as a leader or as a hiring person that's bringing people on to ask these sorts of questions and relay this information. That way it doesn't leave employees or members of teams feeling like they have no direction. Um,
absolutely. I
which
think,
definitely contributes to that
yes,
burnout
it
feeling.
contributes to burnout. I think leaders who are authentic, right, and are being honest, this is as much as I can tell you right now. And when it's a good time to tell you more, I will, right? I think when people talk in the gray area, more specifically, leaders talk in the gray area, it allows people to make assumptions. And people are
Yeah.
going to make assumptions that they don't know because they're curious and they want to know, right?
Yeah.
So I think like being very specific in our language and being using clear language so our employees understand what's going on, right? So then they can find out how they can best support the organization, right?
Yeah.
I also will say that, and I think this is more of a cultural thing. I'll say that,
Yeah.
growing up, I was taught that I have to work twice as hard as other people. more specifically, more twice as hard than white people to get into leadership roles, right? And I
Yes.
love to debunk that idea, and I love to talk to my mom about that now. And as I am a mom, I do not share that type of language with my daughter. I've never shared that type of language with students I've taught in the past. Now, leaders and other, educators that I lead. But I do believe that whether you are white, black, blue, or green, you are already good enough. And the idea of working so hard to obtain what you want, as far as in a professional setting, can lead to burnout, lead
Yeah.
to unfulfilled expectations that won't happen because you worked so hard, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes organizations will make decisions, and it has nothing to do with if you were qualified or not, right? That's just what organizations do. You cannot hang your hat on what organizations do, but you can hang your hat on what you're going to do.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And but I do think it is, I think it is important to recognize that that people make decisions that we don't agree
Mhm.
with and
Yeah.
that are, not in line with our values.
Right.
And I think you're exactly right. We can't control that. And I do think that there is an awareness that needs to come to, especially minorities, to be able to recognize that there is a difference. And it doesn't, maybe it's not said out loud, but it is there. And so, like, call a spade,
Yep.
right? Recognize it, own it, and then say, okay. And I ask, as a white woman, I want to always know and ask, like, how can I support equality, and how can I, foster a space, just at least in with me, whether it's with my clients or as a leader, of like, I want to recognize where people are feeling that
Mhm.
they need an extra encouragement, or they need space to grow, or whatever it may be. And so
Right.
just being open to having conversations like that, I think is important.
Absolutely. I think, burnout is a really heavy topic that I think, maybe 10 years ago, no one talked about. People just expect you to show up and work and be unhappy, right? And I hope that today's conversation really changed the narrative, that I am not at any means saying that people should show up at work, do whatever they're told, and be unhappy. I think that you
Yeah.
need to start looking at your personal values, your professional goals, right? And look at the organization and then determine, does this align for me? And if it does not align, be willing to make a choice, right? And I think making the choice is one of the hardest parts, right? And if you're not ready to make a choice, then start to really implement and set some boundaries, right? Of what you are willing to do and what you're willing to not do. And then lastly, I'll say, look at how you define success, right?
Mm.
We've learned success from the people who raised us, from the shows we've watched on TV, the movies we watch, right? And
Our
success,
environment.
yes, success can look different from everybody, right?
Yeah.
And if you're super productive, right, and I'm super busy and I'm booked and my calendar is this, does not mean that you're productive, right? Does not mean that you are successful, right? We get to define what success looks like for us. So redefine that, right? And I think if we can start to redefine what success looks like, we will be less burnt out on a job that does not define who we are.
Right. And I think that that's something that I bring up to clients all the time, is your worth is not defined from
Yep.
your task list
Yep.
and how many check boxes you had today at work, or whatever it may be.
Yep.
And so it's so important because we do, you used this phrase earlier, like hustle culture.
Yep.
And we do live in a culture that people are just like fighting to get to the top, and like, chasing this light at the end of the tunnel, but like, what's the actual light? And
Yeah.
so, and then also the stigma behind, like, having other priorities, right? Whether
Yep.
it be a family or hobbies, or
Right.
just taking time to, like, take a mental health day.
Yep.
And then too, and this is totally off topic, but it's making me think of it. um Corporations and companies switching to, like, unlimited PTO,
Yeah.
which is a whole backwards thing of, like, because it's like unlimited. So, like, you can have, but then it has to all get approved. It's very bizarre. And then they're like, I don't
Very
really
much
want to
so.
ask for it, but
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just, that could be a whole nother topic, but it's just an
Absolutely.
important, I'm thinking about it. I'm like, oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I
But I guess,
definitely go ahead. I'm so
oh, go
sorry.
ahead. Sorry.
I just am definitely thinking about, how people can continue to show up for themselves in their
Yeah.
work environment.
Be
And
resilient.
yeah, Melissa will be attaching some resources that her colleagues have used to really combat the hustle culture, the burnout culture, and I'll reframe a few things and ground us back in this. I think in order to avoid burnout, we have to set very clear boundaries, right? We have to redefine our success. And I think I mentioned this earlier in our conversation, but practice mindfulness, right? When you're feeling dysregulated, just stop for a minute in a busy workday and just take a minute, right? And I like to call it a minute to arrive, right? Where your feet are planted, you are in touch with your five senses, right? And then really reprogram our thinking and then be able to move forward. And I'm always an advocate for change, advocate for workplace policies, advocate for how you are showing up in the workplace. And if those things, you still feel misaligned, then be prepared for change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All of these things I think are going to be so helpful and so helpful even for me to be thinking about it in a different space of workplace burnout. So I'm so appreciative of you, Danielle, for
No, thank
sharing your
you.
infinite wisdom and knowledge with us and allowing me to share this space with you. And all of our viewers today, just thank you for taking the time for yourself. That's the big
Yeah,
piece that I guess I'm thinking about throughout this whole mission and this whole project that we're working towards is putting yourself first. And I think that that's one of the biggest things to help also combat burnout. And
absolutely.
so we hope you enjoyed today's session and got some nuggets of helpful knowledge and continue to tune in to our Talk Therapy Tuesdays and Thursdays series. We'll be continuing to present all month. And yeah,
Thank you. I really love this session.
me
And
too.
yeah, I'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Please be sure to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell to know when we upload a new video.